very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for such a warm welcome. What a great event. Well done, Alec. This is really knocking it out of the park. It's fabulous. I've known Alec for a very long time, since he started Transport and Energy, and we've always thought about, what if we threw a cat in amongst the pigeons? What if we talk about things that don't get talked about as much as other things? So with that in mind, we've seen an enormous amount of change in the market from the transition from internal combustion to EV, but there's been a limited amount of discussion about the context within which that sits. You know, you have to go and fill your car up, or your truck up, or your van up at a petrol station. You're not allowed to store it in your kitchen or your basement. But you can charge your electric car really anywhere that there's a suitable plug-in point. Depends on the speed, the ampage, whatever. But there are multiple solutions to EV charging. And while we've spoken a lot about the on-street and car park and local authority model, I thought it would be interesting basically to see what the market makes of this by people who are in it. You know, there are more spaces and places to charge. It attracts retailers, property companies, petrol filling station operators, supermarkets, other retailers, power companies. You've seen a few of those around, and very interesting chats this morning. So what is it all about? What is the disruption that comes next? And I'm joined by my four panelists. Thank you for coming. If I can ask you briefly to introduce yourselves, starting with Ian.
Hi everyone, I'm Ian Johnston. I'm the CEO of Osprey Charging. We are one of the UK's largest public rapid charging networks, and for at least another 4 hours we are the current Transport and Energy Charging Network of the Year 2023.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Miller. I work as an independent advisor to lots of you in the room actually, so it's lovely to see so many of you. I was one of the founding directors of a company called Octopus Electric Vehicles, so I know a lot about EV leasing and salary sacrifice. And I also led something at the same time called Powerloop, which is a vehicle-to-grid system for domestic vehicles to be able to plug in at home and sell energy back to the grid. So now I have the great honour and privilege of working across the industry and across technologies as well, hoping and helping to accelerate decarbonisation and electrification.
Hi, I'm Patrick Dunne. I'm the Group Property Director for Sainsbury's, Group Procurement Director. I also lead Smart Charge, a little baby of mine that I'm growing fast. And I lead the carbon agenda for Sainsbury's as well.
Hi, I'm Tom Peacock. I'm the Head of Group Property at SGN. SGN have 100 filling stations across Great Britain. I used to be a colleague of Simon at GridServe, having come from a bigger network of filling stations at MRH. We're just starting our rollout of our own high-powered EV charging network across all of our sites, well, almost all.
Thank you, everyone. And just to give a bit of background, I'm jointly leading the Places for London rapid and ultra-rapid charging project, which we have announced Fastnet as our preferred partner. Watch this space over the next week or so for further announcements. But effectively, we're leveraging the legacy property portfolio of London's transport infrastructure and the legacy land that exists as a function of 160 plus years of transport services to deliver EV charging in land that has traditionally been unused or underutilized. So with that, starting with Tom to lead off, how do you manage the transition from internal combustion fuels to EV, and what are the insights in that transition? Because it's happening, and it'll happen quickly over the next 3 to 5 years.
It will, yes. So we kind of we've analysed our network. We've got 25 sites where we can put high-powered EV charging in addition to what's currently there. We know it's got to be high-powered charging. Our customer's got to come in and it's got to come out. We're not like Sainsbury's where your customer can charge while they're using your shop. As I came to SGN, we were discussing whether to use the CPOs or to do it in-house. Companies like GridServe, etc. And it's a case of, if you're a filling station business, you have to own the roadside customer. So leasing that growth area out to a CPO is not right for us. It creates a few headaches doing it internally. Obviously, the capex is very high. But doing it at a slower rate, driven by returns, means that there are issues. Issues such as going to Alpatronic or Tritium and trying to buy 10 chargers at a time is very difficult and very expensive. Trying to buy cheap power for supplying those high-powered EV chargers, we're entering into term contracts for a year at a pence per kilowatt hour, a very expensive rate. So we need to get to a size where that becomes cheaper, but that takes time. But it's worth it for us. We have to own that customer. Leasing that opportunity out would be the wrong thing to do. The greatest disruptor to us is charging from home, and any good network churns their network, on a normal basis. But our basis of churn now is with a focus of what sites will be most impacted by charging from home.
Thank you. And given the dwell time to dispatch the same pounds worth, or £10 worth of electricity versus £10 worth of petrol, it takes longer. You and I have spoken offline about the idea that a standard layout, a petrol filling station would need sort of almost 50 charge points in order to provide the same turnover. What does that mean for the network of petrol filling stations that we see? How do they change? What changes on the landscape?
Well, firstly, as I said, it dictates it's got to be very, very high power, 400 kilowatt chargers, to keep that dwell time as low as possible. And if we've got a customer there that's there for 15 minutes, we can monetize 10 minutes of that quite readily. Let me give you, for instance, when we move away from those first 25 sites into the body of the network, where we're going to have to take out the fuel infrastructure, then we're making harder decisions there. At the moment, we've got a clear path of where we're going, high-powered charging, customers there for 15 minutes. We can put that in addition to where we are. So for us, it's about continuing what we're doing, be very efficient. The previous presentation is, move from just looking at turnover into looking at how much this stuff makes. And that is where our focus lays. And that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you.
Can I come in?
Of course.
A different perspective would be, for fossil fuel businesses, of which Sainsbury's is a very large one, or venture into electric vehicle charging is a natural hedge in 30 years from now. So when I was talking to the board about the economics of short-term view on EVs going up and stuff, the main part of the conversation is about our carbon agenda and what will be the hedge strategy in 30 years when fossil fuel is grossly declining, and what will we do with these petrol stations and so forth. And so I think for all of us, different sizes of businesses, whatever, moving into electrical vehicle charging or decarbonization or whatever you want to call it, is actually a moment in time of beginning to strategize for what will inevitably come, which was the decline of fossil fuels. And depending on how large your business is, we're a diversified business, of course, fuel is one part of it, but this is the beginning. The day when I have to refurbish a petrol station and the sales are in decline, we may have to think about what the purpose of that location will be. And it may be 100% electrification at that time. And so there's short-term view, economics, etc., and right location for customers, etc. But there's also a long-term play here, which is the decarbonization of Britain and Europe and the world. And fossil fuels someday will be in grossly declining, and we as an economic business as well need an alternative to that, and hence our venture into electrical charging is mostly with that in mind as well.
Thank you. That leads me nicely on to the next question, which I'm going to put to Ian of Osprey, which is, your model has seen the evolution of charging stations on their own to charging stations incorporating retail. Salmon's leap down near Exeter is a great example of that. I guess the exam question to you and to the panel, is it stop to charge or charge while stopped? Because it seems to be evolving towards the latter.
I would say it's truly both and a bit in the middle as well. I mean, we've got now about 1,500 charge points across the UK. We've got charge points in forecourts. We've got charge points with other supermarkets. We've got charge points in retail parks. We've got charge points in local authority car parks. What we see is some of our very busiest sites are supermarkets and retail sites that have that advantage of thousands of customers already every day with great amenities in the site. We have some of our busiest sites are the best en route forecourts and roadsides like Sam's Leap, which is, I guess, a bit like a GridServe forecourt of the future. So it comes down to user case. Now, the big difference, as Tom said here, is that in the old days, 100% of us would fill up our vehicle at a forecourt. Now, a proportion of us will fill up at home, and then we're out and about, we will fill up, and electricity is everywhere, all around us, unlike the big liquid fuel tanks. So you can fill up at the petrol station, you can fill up at the supermarket, you can fill up at the retail park, the train station, or your workplace. So the answer to the question is actually, it will be in the most convenient locations for those user cases, and the competition will therefore play out in who is, if you imagine the bar has risen to a point where every charge point is reliable, every charge point is easy to pay, every charge point roams properly, then it comes down to where do you as a human being prefer to spend your time? If you are already making that life decision to spend 30 to 45 minutes at the supermarket, what a fantastic place for you to charge. One less thing you need to do in your life is go and refuel your car. If you are driving on an A road, if you are parking at a train station for the day, that is the joy of this sector, is that that's where you charge. So our challenge is creating the economic business models that suit that dwell time. So for a circa 45-minute, I would guess, supermarket stay, it's very easy to make a rapid charging dwell time fit with an economic model where you can make enough money from it. Again, Tom's talked about how do you monetize that very short 50-minute stay. You have the increased cost of bringing in ultra rapid charging. And the previous presentation talked about what you do with what dwell time and power do you need in those locations. So for us to win, we've got to get that formula right of the right power charging in the perfect location. And bear in mind, this is a small country, a very compact country. Most of that land is already owned by a lot of retailers and other businesses. So that's where that land grab game is going. And then you've got to get the right level of service and the right amenities in it. So the game's going to evolve over time. We're still in the position now where Sainsbury's has done an amazing job. Your peers, when clear, we've seen MFG now are doing the partnership with Morrison's, but the other supermarkets way behind you in what they're doing. So there's so much convenient, amazing real estate. We haven't even started on yet. We're still in that phase of the game. And then when all that great land is populated, then it's quality and amenities that will decide where you charge.
As you said to me when we were talking about this before the conference, we're right at the bottom of the S-curve. We think we're busy because we are at the coalface as people in the industries that we represent and in this sector. But, we're only at 1%, really, aren't we, on a national basis? I guess that leads me nicely onto a question I wanted to ask Claire, which was, how do we sense the nature and number of business models in the EV sector? And when do we know we've got enough? Or do we know we've got enough?
That's a great question. I don't know about when do we know we've got enough. I think that maybe that's the top of the S-curve.
Yeah.
But taking it back to where we are today and thinking about business models and thinking about what strategy to go after and which ones make sense. I think I want to pick up on what Ian's just said about dwell time. I think actually thinking about dwell time and thinking about what do customers really need is really the jumping off point for all of these new business models, and thinking about what else can you build around that customer experience is what's going to give that ramping up the S-curve where people start to have choice. They start to have more confidence in the technologies as well. So the technology of the car, again, the reliability we know has been mentioned there already, but, in a few days' time, we've got a big date coming in the world of public charging and public charging regs coming in. So thinking about customer experiences is going to become increasingly important. Why should I go here versus there? Now, at the moment, like, for example, I live out in Ipswich. To drive here, there aren't that many places to stop en route that mean I can use up enough batteries to make it worthwhile having a quick stop to move on here. In the future, I know that will be different. I'll have much more of a choice. So I think, the new business models that are coming, they're not just going to come, they are coming, are about reward and about enticing customers to choose this over that. Obviously, Sainsbury's, we've got the Nectar scheme, for example, which is really exciting for those customers, suddenly having the opportunity to get a little bit more for something that they would be doing already, again, back to dwell time. So I think thinking about rewards is going to be really important. And, how do you nudge people's behaviour? I think so. Particularly in the longer journeys, nudging someone to stop here, have a Costa, or stop there, and you get a different experience. You might get a reward. You might get a benefit. And then I guess the other one in the business models is around energy. Anyone that knows me here will know that I love to talk about the ways that these batteries on wheels can end up being, a really important part of the grid, and how business models for CPOs and other like charging providers, energy providers, how it all folds together. And that's where it gets really exciting. For CPOs who want to drive utilization at a certain time, naming no names, but Ian said next to me, exploring and experimenting with, if I give someone the opportunity to park here because maybe they wish to dwell overnight, what if I make that charging cheaper, but in the daytime, and I can change the speed at which that charger will work. Maybe I can play tunes with the infrastructure I'm putting in. And I think we're very, very much at the beginning of that, thinking about how does the driver with that battery on wheels, that asset, and the CPO come together, and their grid connection and their own energy strategy. How do those two things start to come together? And that's where, to your point about when will we know that we've got enough, I don't see an end to that, because that is an entirely new and dynamic market between the drivers and the vehicles and the CPOs and the energy markets.
I intentionally preloaded that question because I knew I was hoping you'd say that. Turning back, it's all about the levers, isn't it? It's basically what do you do with the time, because the charge is unattended. You've got lots of things you can do while you're charging. And I guess turning to Patrick, working for one of the larger supermarket groups in the UK, what is the relationship between retail and EV? Because you've got more levers to pull than anyone else on this platform at the moment.
I think it links back to your previous point, which is, I have a philosophy: charge when you can. I was out walking with my wife, and she says, every time there's a toilet, she says she goes to it. She says, because I can. And at a certain age, and I think EV is very like that. It's but it comes back to missions. In the retail sector, we talk about the missions. What is your mission? Is your mission to come and charge? Is your mission to come and shop? Can you do both? We're time short in this planet, and using your time effectively is what we focus on. I've talked to Ian about this. When we started shouldn't we, a few years ago, go with the CPO or whatever, we went around the industry and we charged at everyone's charges, and we concluded it was a very technologically led industry. And there was a huge lack of customer focus. And we said, okay, we're a very customer focused business. So how are we going to, of course, use technology, but drive a customer? What does the customer want? And we then entered into a phase of lots of barriers to enable the most efficient and most effective service for customers. So we started just knocking all those barriers down. And I think someone asked me a few weeks ago, where's the future? Whatever customers want, whatever they need. And I think in answer to your other question, the different models will economically grow or disappear based on customer choice. And if you're building something that customers don't want, you may be lucky that in the future they will want it. But generally, we need to listen to what customers and consumers want. And I think the role of retail, whether it's a grocer, whether it's a retail park, if you can make a compatible multi-mission journey, I'm charging, I'm shopping, I'm taking my dog to the vet, whatever it has to be, then that is the future, I think. Whatever location strategy that you can find those missions, gardening centres, is another great opportunity with the right gardening providers. But I think it's about the missions and time. Time is the most important thing. And particularly with the fleet companies in the room, I talk to a lot of fleet companies. Time is their most criticality. They need their vans on the road being productive. And so, to Ian's point, networks that are reliable, networks that are accessible in the right locations, and if you get all those things right, then the different types of customers will shop your mission.
Simon, just to make the point, so because fleet has been such a major driver of the growth in EV, that demographic is very skewed to the general population. So you see a lot of retail focused offers out there that will improve when the mainstay of the population takes up with EV and spends more money per kilowatt hour. They don't have a fuel card, they don't have a fleet card. So what is there now will change when the main body of the population takes up with their EV.
Thanks. Very insightful. Thanks all. I guess turning to a couple of other points, any thoughts on the current market status, and an open question to the panel? We seem to be at an inflection point. There's 100+ charge operators in the UK. At one point, there were 100 plus car manufacturers in the UK in the early 1910s. That soon changed. What happens next? How many organizations get bought? How many buy others? How many get sold to others? What happens?
Well, I would say all different industries have their different phases that they go through, and we're about to go into a phase of some form of consolidation. Location strategy will be critical. The mission that your consumers are on is critical, that you match that with the right location. But as I say, there's still new models, new opportunities to be created, fleet markets, particularly consumers. We're finding in Sainsbury's that as we build these, we can identify how many cars come into our car park. We can also identify if they're an EV or if they're a non-EV. And we're finding that 6 months, 9 months on, more EVs are coming into the car park, and then we're using Nectar cars. But the moral of the story is we're seeing people convert. They're having the confidence to know that there's a reliable infrastructure supporting their domestic charging, because we're not after you to charge 100% with us. It's charged when you can. But we're seeing more and more EVs come into the car park in certain clusters, and we believe it's because the infrastructure is now giving them the confidence to convert. And more of that there's a lot of growth still to come in that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we will see consolidation. I think if you look at the sheer number of charging networks that were being very competitive, even 6-9 months ago, that's changed. And what's happened, there's a few things. Firstly, rolling out the infrastructure is very expensive, as you guys have said. The networks are spending 30-50 million pound a year. Now, all of the networks, all of the business plans would have shown us making profit by now, by 2024. The facts are, number one, COVID has delayed everyone by 2 years. Secondly, there are less EVs on the road than we all thought there would be. And also the grid landscape has just completely changed. Even though the cost of electricity has come down from where it was in the war in Ukraine, the cost of operating rapid charging infrastructure now on some metrics now is up to 1,000% greater than it was just 2 years ago. So I think I'm safe to say there is no public charging network in the UK making profit today, and the investors behind those businesses cannot keep shoveling hundreds of millions of pounds in. And therefore, what do you need? You need the scale so that you can spread all those costs across a wider network base. And unfortunately, the smaller players, the players that haven't reached that scale, will have to look to be consolidated or to merge or to outsource part of the operation. So I think we're about to see a really interesting 12 months now where we're probably going to see a bit of a shake-up across Europe in terms of the networks that are there. I think the consumer regulations are rightfully, from a consumer perspective, going to put the networks under more pressure. There's going to be there's a massive amount of technical work that needs to be done to deliver the reporting and the visibility of data for the consumer regulations. That's all good. It's all part of a mature market. But look, there are parts of our market that are still quite cottage industry. So there's going to be a shake-up. Consumers will benefit. It will mean more standardized quality and service. But I think I would imagine if you open your ZapMap filter in 12 months' time, it might look a bit different in terms of number and maybe probably a bit shorter in terms of options. The sites will be there, the option's still there for the customer, but maybe a different logo above some of the operators. I think I'm not kind of talking bleakly about the future, but it may be that businesses shift business models. So many operators play in home and public, many play in AC and DC, and I think what you'll see is people stick into the part of the sector where they've achieved the most scale best, and they might walk away from the parts where they're smaller players, is my personal view.
I'll just pick up on a couple of those points. The word I was waiting for you to say and thinking, don't say it, because I can say it's roaming. So roaming is really prevalent in European markets, and that I think has allowed a proliferation of more operators to last for longer in those markets. We're about to see a requirement for at least one roaming partner as part of the public charging requirements coming in, or regs coming in. I think that's going to be really important in accelerating through this stage. When we think back to mobile phones, and you had your phone, it was on this network, and that was how your phone worked. And if you happen to live somewhere and you had a network and they didn't have much coverage in that area, you were stuffed, and you would shift from, I don't know, O2 to Vodafone or vice versa, so you could get some coverage. So I feel like we can't allow ourselves to fall into that trap with EV charging, and I feel like with the regs coming in, that's one of the good things is making us all think about how does roaming look and feel. And another good point I think made is not just for the domestic, you and me and our friends charging. It's also about fleets and how we make it easy across the board. And so when we think about which charge point operators are thinking about serving which markets, I think that's a really good point that Ian's made, that actually not all charge point operators need to serve all parts of the market. There's an awful lot there to serve. So that's also going to be like a really important, part as this sort of models develop.
That's very insightful. Thanks. I mean, what it says to me is, we have a human bias that says, no matter what industry we're in, that the future always looks like more of what we've seen in the last 6 months, right? And it says to me, the future is going to be very, very different to what we have seen before. It's not necessarily going to be a radical evolution, but it's certainly going to be an evolution more akin to the tech industry and then to the automotive or the fuel sector. And I guess just to open it up again, you're talking to Elon, you're sitting in his palace in Texas. He says, where is the industry in the next 5 or 10 years? What do you say?
Sorry, what was the question? Yeah,
Sorry.
I was thinking about Elon and his.
You feel about Elon? Yeah, exactly. No, you can't go into spaceships. No, you have to stay. Where is the industry in the next 5 or 10 years? What's your your one prediction? We won't hold you to it, but what do you think?
Anywhere or the UK?
Anywhere. Wide open.
Anywhere. Well, okay, let's talk about trucks, as we haven't had enough to chat about big stuff. Where's Chris Ashley? He'll be happy. We're going to see much larger vehicles coming onto the roads that are electrified, and we're going to see really interesting new charging sites that cater purely for the larger vehicles. So great work going on ZHID projects. That will, those projects are deploying, they're designing and deploying infrastructure right now for EHGVs, for the 3 of the 4 projects that are electrified. And that will then run for 5 years gathering data. So at least, over the next 5 years, we as an industry are going to get some really interesting data about how HGVs work on our roads, which I think so far we have a gap, right? We have a big data gap there. So that's, for me, is one really exciting thing we're going to learn more about.
I think you raised it earlier, the mobile phone industry, 15, 20 years, maybe a bit longer for some of us. You used to just talk about your network all the time, how good, how bad, how terrible. Nobody talks about it now. So I think the next 10 years will be enough quantum of infrastructure and commercial models that you won't have any range anxiety. You'll just be shopping or going to the gym or whatever it is, traveling long distances with the ultimate confidence that you can charge. And it's affordable. In any industry, I remember in 1992, a representative from Avon Rubber come into my office with the first of a kind mobile phone. And it was a brick, but it was £6,000. And there was only about 10 of them in the country. And I says, who do you speak to? But the cost now, of course, for the technology like that is de minimis. And, and I think infrastructure and charging costs and so forth will, over time, as supply and demand kicks in, make it a known conversation. It'll just be something that you do at home or in the marketplace,
I mean, the other technology angles to bring in here as well, which make it very hard, I think, for anyone running networks and thinking about the future of networks, is how the technology of the vehicles will evolve as well. I'm conscious that Ewan's in the room, so I'm going to talk about batteries, so Ewan will shout me down if I get it wrong. But, we've seen, early EVs with, certain battery chemistries giving way to, newer and newer, better and better battery chemistries where we see, power densities are increasing. So we're also thinking about, is this charging infrastructure right for the vehicles that are on the road today? What will the charging infrastructure need to look like in 5 to 10 years' time that matches the vehicle battery chemistries and sizes and ranges that will be available in the future as well? And I think that's really hard. That's like, kind of doing multiple equations all at the same time, trying to work out which sites for which chargers. But that's the opportunity as well. Thinking about where those cars are going to be, what they're going to look like.
We used to say that the key part of our job is to establish a network of locations with the grid connection. And we say that if you imagine the future, there's a hologram charger. The point is, it doesn't matter what's above the ground. That technology will evolve and change. I think we all probably budget that we will swap out the hardware there. The key thing we need to establish is a location where people want to be, and we get the power from the grid in. And then the rest is the future, but you need that location.
And that's interesting because it's a land grab and a grid grab. It's like,
That
maybe
grid
grab's the wrong
grab,
word,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
it's really, maybe it's an aggressive word, but do you know what I mean? Like a grid grab, right, yeah.
Good grab.
Something also I'd like to say, whilst I've got the microphone, is I made a new friend, to Chris Rimmer's point earlier, on the table I was sitting on earlier. So I'm going to call out Dave, who sat just here. I'm going to embarrass him now or shout you out. So Dave is from Enged, and Dave is working, or has submitted a change proposal for the standing charges. And I think that's a super critical part. So I just wanted to say, knowing I was going to sit up here, that's, I think, the hottest topic. Where's Vicky? I don't know, I can't see Vicky in the room, but like probably one of the hot, there she is, right at the back. Vicky Reid, CEO of Charge UK. Matt Adams is over there as well from Region, and where's Mark Constable? Like, these are some of the fundamentals that we need to fix today to make the businesses work today, so we've got them in the future. So I think also, whilst we're thinking about those future scenarios, actually making it cheaper now, and some of these levers are going to be super important. So this is Dave, he's over here. If you care about having a nice dynamic standing charge, not a fixed standing charge, then he's the guy to thank, and go and have a chat with him.
That's fascinating, and many of those points that we just raised were right at the core of our approach to market in the JV. I just noticed we are slightly over time. Will you all put your hands together and say thank you to my guests? Thank you. Very informative. Super.